highly trained and well-equipped North Korean army swarmed across the 38th parallel to attack unprepared South Korean defenders. Caught off guard, they were all but overwhelmed until the United Nations took its historic vote to intervene. The war seemed in sight as the Allies pushed north toward the North Korean capital of Pyongyang. Then it happened. The Chinese Red armies, numbering hundreds of thousands, swarmed over the frontier against thinly held United Nations positions. Confronted by overwhelming numbers, UN armies were forced into inevitable retreat, while men wondered whether Red China would touch off World War III. Would the atom bomb be the answer to the Chinese hordes? President Truman said that it was under consideration.
If the United Nations yields to the forces of aggression, no nation will be safe or secure. If aggression is successful in Korea, we can expect it to spread throughout Asia and Europe and to this hemisphere. We are fighting in Korea for our own national security and survival.
Time for the Longines Chronoscope. Our distinguished guest for this evening is the Honorable James E. Van Zandt, United States Congressman from Pennsylvania.
It's my opinion that we should fight the war to win in Korea, rather than try to settle it at the diplomatic table, which is impossible when you're dealing with Russia.
Would you extend your will to win so far as to include the atomic bomb?
Very definitely, Dr. Peterson. I've always been a firm believer that we should use the atomic bomb, not only on Korea, but north of the Yalu River in Manchuria.
Does that mean that you believe that it could be effectively used as a weapon in the Korean theater?
Yes, I think that there are several targets in northern Korea we could use. That is, we could destroy them with the atomic bomb. We could destroy them and contaminate them. And then, of course, there are targets in Manchuria that should be destroyed.
This is the destructive power we pray God we will never be called upon to hurl at any nation. But should it become necessary, let us not hesitate because it is foreign to our nature to use the power which has been given us.
I propose the President of the United States advise the commander of the North Korean troops to withdraw his forces beyond the 38th parallel within 1 week, or use that week to evacuate civilians from a specified list of North Korean cities that will be subjected to atomic attack by the United States Air Force.
There will soon be an end to this cold and wicked war when those hard-headed communists get what they're looking for. Only one thing that will stop them, and their atrocious fun. If General MacArthur drops a atomic bomb, they'll be fired up in metal, flying all around, and the radioactivity will burn them to the ground. If there's any commies left, they'll be all on the run. If General MacArthur drops a atomic bomb.
I ask you, the American citizen, to let your congressman know how you feel about this proposal.
Well, I really don't know what to do.
But you do feel the Korean situation affects us more than anything else?
Yes, I feel that our boys that we should get our boys home. They've been over there long enough, and there doesn't seem to be any end to the situation.
Listen to what my mom said about how bad things are back home. Everybody's hoarding. Profiteers are getting fat contracts. Neighbors say politicians are using the war to their own advantage. And all our chief atomic scientists are spies. And a lot more.
Now, just take it with a grain of salt. Let me tell you how the commies plant propaganda back home. Some time ago, Mac, Johnny, and I managed to get our last leave together in a big city.
These poor boys will shed their innocent blood in a war that this country is provoking.
Get a load of that.
Asiatic people all want the peaceful establishment of native regimes without the interference of United States troops. Communists don't want war. War would be world suicide. Only communist countries can guarantee you peace.
Why don't you go live in a communist country then?
Did you blow your top on a street corner there?
You look pretty well off, sister, to be tearing down the country that gives you freedom of speech.
We're living in a country that's the finest place on earth, but some folks don't appreciate this land that gave them birth. I hear that up in Washington they're having an awful fuss, 'cause communists and spies are making monkeys out of us.
The question is, have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? You refuse to answer that question. Is that correct?
I have told you that I will offer my beliefs, my affiliations, and everything else to the American public, and they will know where I stand, as they do from what I have written.
Stand away from the stand.
For Americanism for many years, and I shall
stand away from the stand.
Fight for the Bill of Rights, which
I
you
will
are trying to destroy.
Stand away from the stand.
The bureaus and departments have been busy night and day. They're figuring out just how we gave our secrets all away. And Congress has appointed a committee, so they said, to find out who's American and who's a low-down red.
I am holding in my hand a microfilm of very highly confidential, secret State Department documents. These documents were fed out of the State Department over 10 years ago by communists who were employees of that department and who were interested in seeing that these documents were sent to the Soviet Union, where the interests of the Soviet Union happened to be in conflict with those of the United States.
I'm no communist, and I'll tell you that right now. I believe a man should own his own house and car and cow. I like this private ownership, and I want to be left alone. Let the government run its business, and let me run my own.
Our education is proceeding apace as to how Russia operates and how they got the atom bomb. Not by independent research, but from America, from traitors within our own ranks.
Special broadcast on the scene of Sing Sing prison, where the Rosenbergs have just been executed.
Julius and Ethel Rosenberg have gone to the electric chair. First to go into the death chamber was Julius Rosenberg. He wore an impassive expression on his face. He walked in slowly. He was preceded by a rabbi who was chanting the 23rd Psalm, which everyone knows very well. He proceeded immediately over to the chair. He didn't say a word to anyone, hardly glanced at anyone. He sat down in the chair The straps were applied, and the first jolt of electricity was sent through his body at 8:04 tonight.
She died a lot harder. When it appeared that she had received enough electricity to kill an ordinary person and had received the exact amount that had killed her husband, the doctors went over and pulled down the cheap prison dress, a little dark green printed job, and placed the I can't say it. Placed the stethoscopes to her and then looked around, looked at each other rather dumbfounded and seemed surprised that she was not dead. Believing she was dead, the attendants had taken off the ghastly strappings and electrodes and the black belts and so forth. And these had to be readjusted again, and she was given more electricity, which started again kind of a ghastly plume of smoke that rose from her head and went up against the skylight overhead. After two more of those jolts, Ethel Rosenberg had met a maker. She'll have a lot of explaining to do, too.
Immediately after the execution, of course, the bodies were taken away. There is nothing much further to report at this particular time. There have been no demonstrations. The heat has been extremely intense here. There's a heavy fall, and there has been an air of deep tension about this whole proceeding up here. But it is now all over. The newsmen have dispersed, and Julius and Ethel Rosenberg have gone to the electric chair.
That was an on-the-spot report on the execution tonight at Sing Sing prison of Ethel and Julius Rosenberg. Now the Great Day Show. As we join Red Benson and the gang at the Marine Barracks in Brooklyn Navy Yard, the program is already in progress.
The question before us is this: should the hydrogen bomb be built?
All the world knows we Americans are constructive, not destructive. However distasteful this may be to us, there is no choice in the matter. Let us build a bomb.
It is my decided opinion that the United States of America should immediately begin the construction of the H-bomb.
I feel we must make the H-bomb.
It is my personal opinion that we should manufacture and produce the H-bomb in quantity.
The Russians will try it anyhow. And should they learn the secret of its manufacture before we do, the life and security of all freedom-loving people will be in danger.
I would like to add, however, that the United States of America should not necessarily use this bomb, but rather look upon it as a peaceful guardian and protector of the basic American doctrines of liberty and democracy against the obstacles of red fascism's materialistic and atheistic philosophy.
If the communist bloc does attack, our radar sites and observers will sound the alert. Giant bombers will take to the air. Jet fighters will scream aloft. Fighters will account for some of the enemy, but some will get through to your home.
In times of social crisis and tension, in times when changes come so thick and fast that the individual can no longer place himself in his group, when he knows that something is wrong but doesn't know what, when he feels himself a pawn, in times like these, most men become highly suggestible. They listen eagerly for any voice which sounds authoritative. They listen eagerly for anyone who can tell them what is wrong and what to do to right it, who can diagnose their trouble and prescribe a cure.
Eisenhower, man of the hour. Eisenhower, man of the hour. We love the sunshine of your smile. We see a future in your eyes. You led on into victory. You are the one we idolize. I'm gonna give my vote to you.
I don't mean to say, and no one can say to you, that there are no dangers. Of course there are risks if we are not vigilant. But we do not have to be hysterical. We can be vigilant, we can be Americans. We can stand up and hold up our heads and say, America is the greatest force that God has ever allowed to exist on his footstool. As such, it is up to us to lead this world to a peaceful and secure existence. And I assure you, we can do it. Now, if we first take a look at the strength of America, you and I know that it's the most productive nation on earth, that we are richer by any standard of comparison than is any other nation in the world. We know that we have great military strength, economic, intellectual. But all in all, this total strength of America is one of those things we call, and the world calls, unbelievable. Why then, with all this strength, should we be worrying at times about what the world is doing to us? Actually, we see threats coming from all angles, internal and external, and we wonder what's going to happen to us individually and as a nation. Now, perhaps I can illustrate some of the reasons for this concern of today. Now, only a year ago, the hydrogen bomb was exploded in the Pacific. Last month, another series of these was undertaken. Now this transfer of power, this increase of power, from the mere musket and the little cannon, all the way to the hydrogen bomb in a single lifetime, is indicative of the things that have happened to us. They rather indicate how far the advances of science have outraced our social consciousness. How much more we have developed scientifically than we are capable of handling emotionally and intellectually. So that is one of the reasons that we have this great concern, of which the hydrogen bomb is merely a dramatic symbol.
Dad, I'm finished.
Okay.
Me too. There's a new puzzle. Where is it?
On my bookcase.
Oh, thanks, Daddy.
Kenny, let's have some news. It's about that time.
Come on, Dad.
You can watch that show some other time.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anyone of intelligence and information is hoping and praying that we won't have
a third world war, because in this age of the atomic weapon, war would be a third world war would be a catastrophe for all mankind. And then finally, and this is quite significant, about 60% of the American people revealed in a study which we made through the University of Michigan a year ago that they believed that the military could stop the atomic bombs from falling upon the United States. Well, I'm sorry to have to tell you that the military will tell you that as of today, they cannot stop a successful Russian attack.
That can be corroborated rather dramatically, and we didn't plan it this way, Governor, but the floor manager has just handed me a bulletin saying that the Russians have just exploded a hydrogen bomb.
We must learn to live in a world where we have the hydrogen bomb and the enemy of freedom has the hydrogen bomb. It can destroy any city. That means Fort Worth and Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Amarillo, El Paso, yes, Johnson City.
Every dollar I make goes for taxes and bills. Perhaps they've discovered the cure for my ills. Oh, hi-ho, the hydrogen bomb. Bless it all. Oh, let it fall. Oh, hi-ho, the hydrogen bomb. Oh, God, have mercy on me.
The problem this time is especially acute because this entire area of the Pacific is subject to radiological fallout. And this area is inhabited by some 20,000 people.
The meteorologists had predicted a wind condition which should have carried the fallout to the north of the group of small atolls lying to the east of Bikini. The wind failed to follow the predictions, but shifted south of that line, and the little islands of Rongelet, Rongerik, and Uterik were in the edge of the path of the fallout. The task force commander promptly evacuated all the people from these islands. They were taken to the island of Kwajalein, where we maintain a naval establishment, and there placed under continuous and competent medical supervision. I visited them there last week. Today, a full month after the event, the medical staff on Kwajalein have advised us that they anticipate no illness, barring, of course, diseases which may be hereafter contracted. The 236 natives appear to me to be well and happy. The survey aircraft carefully searched the area and reported no shipping. A Japanese fishing trawler appears to have been missed by the search, but based on a statement attributed to her skipper, to the effect that he saw the flash of the explosion and heard the concussion 6 minutes later, it must have been well within the danger area.
At the time of the explosion, the tuna ship had been sailing far outside the designated safe area of a 75-mile radius. 3 hours after the H-bomb had been detonated, a downpour of radioactive ash descended on the Fortunate Dragon and its crew of 23. None of them knew the nature of the deadly snow. It was 3 days more before the ship and its contaminated crew and fishing catch sailed into port. By that time, the men suffered from the beginning symptoms of deadly radiation poisoning. By the time their illnesses had been properly diagnosed, the hot fish brought back in their holds had been sold into markets all over Japan. A panic ensued. Midnight burials of recent catches in the vicinity of the H-bomb explosion took place all over Japan. The bottom had dropped out of the fish market, and the Japanese people chose to do without the staple food for a long time after the tragic affair.
Another byproduct of the stupendous mid-Pacific blast unfolds in San Francisco, where tuna fish, supposedly made radioactive during the tests, are scrutinized by federal agents armed with Geiger counters for signs of contamination.
Hot tea, anyone? That's not an invitation. It's a problem brewed for the Coast Guard and Customs by the arrival in Brooklyn of a cargo of Japanese tea slightly radioactive. Final conclusion, the tea's radioactivity is within safety limits, not too hot to handle.
Warm. Yeah, June and January, that's what I say. If you ask me, I think it's because of those atom bombs.
Yeah?
Yeah, they've done some cockeyed things to the world. I think they've knocked us south of the equator.
Like I keep saying, well, everybody's so uncertain about everything. They don't seem to know what's going to happen. Bourbon. Straight.
Well, as I was saying, I wouldn't worry nearly as much about the atom bomb if it were to kill you right out. What scares me is that awful gas that deforms you.
Yeah. That would be bad.
Yeah.
It's a drink that you don't pour. Now when you take one sip, you won't need any more. As small as a beetle, or big as a whale. Boom, atomic cocktail.